Songtools, we call it a one-click marketing platform. Playlisting is amazing for almost like the new radio. You're going to get a lot of people to listen to it, but they might be cooking or they might be cleaning and not really paying attention. The advertising tools are really great to get direct listeners that are paying attention and are going to follow you as an artist and are much more intrigued. I've been playing guitar since I've been in the second grade. I had GarageBand ever since I was like a kid, right? So it's like I always was making and putting down ideas my whole life and always was just so perplexed as to okay, put it up on YouTube and how the hell do people get millions of views? And I never understood that.
My guest today is Danny Garcia, co-founder and CEO of the music promotion and discovery site Songtools. Songtools makes it easy to promote your music across Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram and reach out to over 150,000 curated Spotify playlists. It also helps playlisters discover new music and vets both artists and playlists to make sure that the experience is top quality for both. The company's signature tools include SongFly, which is an easy-to-use solution that enables artists to launch ad campaigns complete with visuals with just one click. In less than 1 year, SongFly ran fan-building ad campaigns for close to 3,000 different artists and delivered over 500,000 new fans, artists across all genres. During the interview, we talked about how important focused marketing is for artists, countering bots in music discovery and promotion, strategies for growing playlists, current trends in music business, and much more. I spoke with Danny from his office in New York. All right, Danny, so let's start right at the beginning here. Tell me what Songtools is and how it helps musicians and artists.
So Songtools is we call it a one-click marketing platform. It was really born out of this idea that we found it pretty easy in this new era of music to actually create and distribute music with the democratization of, basically the entire music studio right into a laptop or even a phone. But we always found it really hard once the song was up on these streaming platforms, whether it be YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, etc., to actually get real people to listen to it. There's a huge gap, and we feel like that part of the industry has yet to be democratized. So it was really about divide there. So we kind of set out to understand what it would take to do that. And playlisting became one of the first tools we could bite into because it works across many genres. It's a really amazing tool to get the tires moving on a release early stage and can work, for any stage of artists. So we looked at that as the first place to go into. And what we found was there were a lot of submission platforms. There were a lot of different solutions out there that allowed you to get in front of curators in a way that was almost like soliciting them one-on-one, but not really helping them actually discover tracks. So we went out and created a system that flipped everything on its head, allows the curator to ultimately make the selection as to what songs they want to add to their playlists and really just curate great music. And ultimately that leads to better placements for artists and all of that, which I'm sure we can dive into. But we created a playlisting system that allows you to expose your song to a really large community of pre-vetted playlists and grow through those. And from there, that was in 2020. And we've just been iterating on that concept. And that led us down the path into just creating a greater marketing toolkit that includes advertising. So one-click ads on social media like Instagram and TikTok, because we found that those were also very important to, the modern marketing stack, right? It's playlisting is amazing for almost like the new radio. You're going to get a lot of people to listen to it, but they might be cooking or they might be cleaning and not really paying attention. The advertising tools are really great to get direct listeners that are paying attention and are going to follow you as an artist and are much more intrigued. So our whole goal and what we're trying to do is just take these tactics that have been used by agencies or labels and things like that and bring that into the hands of the artists, make it accessible, make it affordable, make it easy for them to use. So that's kind of where we come from and what we're trying to do.
One of the interesting things is that artists are really great at creating and they're not good at marketing for the most part.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they really need some help. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of times, most times they need help. And This sounds like a platform that's going to help them do that without thinking, too hard about it, because I think that's where it comes in, where suddenly you have to shift your focus from creation to marketing, and it's hard to wear those two hats.
100%. Yeah. And I think it's a fine line too, because, the way that our system works is like, it's not one size fits all, because we have an algorithm in the back that actually reads the genre, the BPM. We have stuff like acousticness and danceability and, previous interactions from fans. And so there's like a lot of stuff that goes into how we select who to show your song to. So that's really cool, because that's helping you get in front of the right person. But at the same time, it's like we still want you to be able to create and use your creative brain in the marketing sense, right? And branding. So we make ad creatives for you with your album cover that are automated. But we also, if you're an artist that has amazing visuals, you can upload those and use those on the platform. So it's like, there's a give and take there. What we want to do is, before getting that ad creative and getting it in front of the fan, there's probably 100 other steps to getting on Meta Ads Manager, for example, and setting up all these campaigns that the artist doesn't necessarily need to know or care on how to set up an ad campaign on a digital platform. They can focus in on making an amazing visual and trust us to get it in front of the right people. So that's kind of, the balance that we've figured out and are trying to run with.
Let's talk about Playlisters Club for a second. I read somewhere where they're all vetted that you have a 50% are rejected.
Yeah.
And what's the normal reason for rejection?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, playlisting is an interesting space because there's a lot of volume there in terms of like people and in terms of playlists and etc. And there's all types of playlists out there. Some of them are malicious. Others are just made by regular music fans that might have been, tricked into buying a bot farm just to grow their followers. So there's like a lot of different potential issues that come out of it. And that was one of the glaring things in the space that when we created Playlister Club, we really wanted to achieve, was like, we wanted to make like the safe playlisting option for artists out there, just because so many had bad experiences. So that's why we've created this closed ecosystem that curators need to apply to be a part of. And to your reference point there, we've accepted less than half of the ones that have applied. The reason for that is a lot of the times, or I guess I can back up and explain how we vet them, because that's very important. Like, we have a team of people actually that interview these curators before they get accepted. Not only do we view all of their growth data, so we can see like the follower count historically, we can see what cities popularly streaming on that playlist, and there are certain cities that are tells as to whether it's real or not. So we look at all the data. If they pass that step one, they then actually get interviewed by someone on our team. And the reason we interview them is, number one, to make sure that they align with our goals, which are, we want to like not only properly expose artists in an organic way, but create new opportunities for them, but also create great playlists, right? So that it's a flywheel, so people keep listening and drive more results to the artists. But then throughout that process, we also get to know that curator and understand how they're growing their playlists. And that's really the tell usually, right? Because, we ask like, okay, they'll be growing through Facebook ads, show us screenshots of the ads manager and things like that to understand, is it real or not for real? So we're able to get to the bottom of that. And sometimes it might just be activity levels, right? Like it doesn't have to be that it's a fake playlist. It's just doesn't meet our minimum threshold for enough people listening because they hadn't promoted it in a while. So there's all types of reasons why. Our goal is just to like align the interests there so that the artists get in front of real people, and also the playlists don't get ruined and are good playlists. And so everything is kind of just, working in the right way.
So speaking of real people, how about bot activity, which, is a problem all over? How do you spot that?
Yeah, that goes back to like that beginning stage, like the step one of that vetting process. We look at all of that back end data and, we've trained, not only do we have internal people at the company, so there's actually 2 or 3 people that are basically full-time doing that and checking playlists, but we also have APIs that we tap into other companies that doing like more in-depth like metrics tracking, and we have our own metrics tracking that we use. So there's a ton of different things that we look at. But yeah, it's a big issue in terms of botting and stuff, in terms of just generally right now. And across all platforms, not just Spotify, not just Apple, just even like Twitter or what was Twitter and all these other platforms, right? So, each platform and industry has their own specific way of dealing with it, but we look at just markers across the board. And then we also do weekly checks. That's the most important part is once they get accepted every week on Fridays, if they're in the program, they actually get checked to make sure that the data is still relevant and good and above board kind of thing to ensure that it's real. Usually we'll catch anyone there. It's usually very low, if at all, but we can catch people that way as well if they do end up, turning into a bot scheme or something like that.
Well, let's go the other way then. Artists that have AI generated product. So do you look for that?
That's a huge thing right now. I mean, honestly, our stance on it has been because everything on Songtools is post distribution. So you can't just like upload directly to us. It has to be distributed to stores. And then we can work with it. So because we need a lot of distribution data and stuff like that. So if it's up on streaming platforms, like we can work with it. And there has been actually some really interesting projects coming through our tool that have been AI generated, everywhere from, I don't want to say dumbest, but the dumbest implementation of it where you just download the song and upload it. And then somewhere in between where they use that as a base and actually create a really interesting project. What we've found is some pretty amazing case studies on the AI side. Like we have a country artist that is an AI country artist that is getting better click-through rates than real country artists on our system, which is kind of crazy. But, and scary in a way, but it is really interesting to see people kind of using this as a creative outlet, right? And then leveraging tools like ours to, maybe test it out, see what people like and test out the different ideas and sounds, right? To see what resonates most with people and then go from there. So what are your thoughts on this whole AI kind of generated content?
Well, it's a tool. And if you look at it as a tool and use it as a tool, then I don't have a problem with it. I wrote a book on AI for music production. So I tried about 120 different music and tech-oriented AIs. So I'm fairly well versed in it. And I know that some of them are fantastic in what they'll do and others not so much. And some are professionally oriented and others are more consumer-oriented. And consumer-oriented ones are the ones that scare me because those are the ones that are, giving you AI slop. That's filling up the internet now. But, again, I can see where you're coming from because if it's already vetted by the platform, then you don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, that's the big thing for us. Like we're not like a streaming platform. We're not like a content delivery system in any way. Like we're strictly like a marketing tool. And we rely a lot on the distribution partners to make sure everything from like the publishing side is clear and everything from, all of that is cleared. And, just being a third party playing in that system, that's kind of just what we rely on. And we wanted to stay away from those like, copyright issues and stuff like that.
How about playlisters then? Does it matter what platform they're on?
Yeah, so that's a great question. On the playlisting side, right now we're Spotify only. On the advertising side, it's much more broad. So it works off of any streaming platform and we can send traffic to basically anything. So you can choose like Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, and then ultimately send the traffic to an option of Apple, Spotify, Deezer, etc., YouTube, or focus in on one. It really kind of depends on your goals of the campaign, even grow email lists. That's also why we built out that ad tool is because it allows people that if you're seeing great results on Spotify, you can now expand that into other platforms. And we've seen some really cool stuff in terms of like, growing like YouTube subscribers all the way to even playlist growth, which is actually one of the upcoming tools that's hopefully coming out now in May, is helping artists, labels, companies grow their own playlists on Spotify. That's going to be really cool because that's like a long-term asset, right? That these companies can use. And even an artist, arguably you might want to, if you have $100 for marketing, you might rather spend that on a playlist than sending it directly to the song because you can put multiple of your songs on that playlist. Those listeners in the future might stick or usually do stick. So you'll be able to promote future releases on there. So there's kind of like a nice, maybe ROI there that you get compared to just sending directly to a song. It depends on your goals as an artist, but it's definitely a marketing tactic that works really well. And we're trying to now simplify that for people.
So how does that work? How would it be better than growing your own playlist, doing it manually?
Yeah, it's much more scalable, I think, is kind of the bottom line, because you, by growing with ads, like, you're not, number one, not having to, do it manually, right? Where, I mean, assuming manually is like you're sending it to people, asking them to like follow it, or, other marketing opportunities, things like that. The advertising is very scalable. So you're able to, like, if you see good results, you can allocate more budget there, and those results will compound, and you can get, I mean, some of these labels have playlists that are millions and millions of followers. Like, they become huge curation channels and brands, right? Obviously pending budgets. But so I think the scalability is one of the ways that it's much better. And then number two is just, like, I think you can test and learn too, because if you come into our system, you can start like approaching it country by country, maybe changing the album cover or the playlist cover and taglines. And you can kind of like iterate on different ideas. And that's really cool to learn, especially from the artist perspective, because you can, if, let's imagine you're like an indie pop artist, you might do the indie angle one week and then the pop angle a different week. And if you find one that works better than the other, that can inform, the greater marketing strategy. That's something that I'm very, like, particularly interested in, is how, like, click-through rates can help people extract, like, insights on just their marketing campaigns and like their songs and stuff, and even just their branding as a whole. So that's something we want to get more and more into in the platform as well.
Speaking of playlists, have you found that there's an optimum number of songs on a playlist?
I haven't done a deep dive on this in a while, and it's time to revisit it. But last time we looked at it, I remember it's like between like 50 and 75 songs is really good. I think you can even go less than that, but in general, it's around that 50 to 75 songs. It also depends on concepts and moods and stuff. Like, I mean, lo-fi is an example of like a genre that songs are generally shorter. So you might have more songs to make up a longer playlist, things like that. But I think that's kind of like a general rule of thumb.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense, I guess, when you think about it. It's like 4 albums, four, 5, 6 albums worth. That's makes sense. Yeah.
I think like the big thing is like, it's less about the number and more about like the duration, like, and also, you don't want to oversaturate a playlist. Like, if you have so many songs in there, I mean, it depends what you're using. Like, some people do, and it's just a personal playlist and you have 500 songs that you just like hit shuffle on. Other people, if you're like using it in a way that's like meant to expose the artist on that playlist, you want to keep it a little tighter so that it's not like, if you put someone in that position 300, it's going to be hard to get that person to, get found through that playlist.
How did Songtools start?
That's a great question. So I've been playing guitar since I've been in the second grade. And kind of going back to what I said at the beginning, I always found it super easy to like create. I had GarageBand ever since I was like a kid, right? So it's like I always was making and putting down ideas my whole life, and always was just so perplexed as to like, okay, I put it up on YouTube, and how the hell do people get like millions of views? And I never understood that. So I studied music business at NYU, and had various different marketing agencies throughout that time, where I really like learned about that, and kind of was just trial and error. I ended up doing a marketing internship at Mom and Pop Records, and then United Masters, the distribution company. So learned a lot through both of those, and met my co-founders, Gonzalo, he's been an industry manager for 25 plus years, and has really like developed artists from the ground up. And I met him through a connection. Also, Andre, who's now also a co-founder of the company, he worked with Gonzalo on a label, but comes much more from like a corporate background. So not necessarily a music guy per se, as much as Gonzalo is. And he introduced me to Gonzalo, and Gonzalo was a manager who he had like #1 song on the Billboard dance charts, right? And this, was managing some pretty awesome artists that were touring around the world. And he was just like also perplexed as to the playlisting thing, because he was like, I have these artists that it's literally make or break if they get Spotify editorial playlists, like for the record. And there's no rhyme or reason as to how they're getting those editorial playlists. This was, I guess at that point, it was like 2018 maybe. So also like peak, editorial playlisting kind of time. And we kind of just sat down and really, I explained what I was working on, which was like independent playlisting. And I was working with like a stable of independent playlists to help artists kind of grow through those. And it was just kind of a meeting of the minds that ended up saying like, how do we make something that's better? And so we kind of just have been iterating, and there's also the development team that we paired up with. So it just kind of came out of a need between someone from the management side and then me from the marketing side wanting to automate some of this, and kind of just growing from there. I mean, we bootstrapped it for the first like year and a half, and then have been consistently growing. I mean, now we have like 100,000 independent artists, 8,000 music companies. And a big goal for us now is to like start partnerships. So we're looking for distribution companies and other companies to partner with. We have a white label tool that these companies can actually use to offer their art marketing tools to their artists. It's like a revenue share kind of thing. So it's really cool because it's not so much us going direct to artists anymore. And we're trying to almost become like the marketing infrastructure for bigger companies as well. So things like that we're starting to get into, but it all started kind of back then with the, I think it was really just need based at the time for both of us.
What don't people know about Songtools that you wish they did?
Wow, that's a great question. I think for us, it's like it was born out of wanting to actually do something that's better and not necessarily just monetize, which in our space is hard to believe, I guess, because in the marketing space, everything is inherently monetized, right? And I think that's some of the finger pointing that anyone in this space kind of gets, especially from the independent artist world or things like that, where it's like, they're so used to getting free things and marketing is inherently monetized. So there's a hill to climb and an education there to say, okay, now I have to like spend money to get fans in, right? Or to get listeners in. So there's that kind of disconnect, right? However, for us, we really believe we've built something that's very additive and actually can help. And if you approach it with the right framework, which our big thing right now is creating like a marketing funnel, and you want the top of the funnel to drive like a lot of, discovery for you. You want the middle of the funnel to drive engagement. And then finally at the end, you want to monetize, because that's one of the questions we get is like, okay, I'm going to spend $100 with you. What am I going to get out of it? Well, the question back would be, do you have it set up are you blindly spending the $100, or do you have everything set up in a way that, is an actual business that can, eventually drive revenue? And, you'll make some back on streams. You can make some back on ticket sales. You can make some back on merch sales, especially if you start actually seeing results through the marketing, where people are going to come in and convert into followers, which will then hopefully buy tickets and etc., or save the track, which will then convert into a follow. So there's a lot of avenues that we look at to say, okay, this is actually really helping you. But the goal for us has always been to like create real things and not vanity kind of like metric chaser type of tools. So I think that's really one of the main things that we've been focused on. And I think it's not that a lot of people don't know, but I think it's like we want that to come across more and more with the tools that we're building.
Do you see any trends? I mean, is there something that you're seeing happening that surprised you, just in the business in general?
I mean, the AI trend is pretty interesting. I think more and more, to me, like one of the interesting trends, and that's like kind of cyclical, is like this whole like A&R type of approach, right? Where it depends, like it goes back and forth. Like you hear about like gut-driven A&R versus data-driven A&R, and like talking to bigger companies. I mean, I've seen strategies at companies where they're like, we own one huge, whatever, folk playlist, and we're just going to A&R based off of that, because we know as soon as we sign an artist, we can throw them on that playlist and they're going to blow up. Whereas you get people on the other hand that are like, I only want to work with things I really believe in. That is a trend that I've actually seen go, it bounces back and forth, and not so much, maybe it's like company by company approach, but I think it's trending now more and more towards the data-driven approach, which is interesting to see. And I think with AI and all of that, it's actually going to flip back, hopefully, towards the human side, which for us, that benefits us because we have human curators, right? So that's one of the big things for us is like we've always been like curation first, and we put like the human touch, and we help empower the curator so that they can actually put their stamp on everything. So for us, that's interesting. So I think, yeah, it's the data driven to gut driven A&R thing is always interesting to just gauge. But what about you? Are there any trends you're observing currently?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. It's AI and how it's being handled. And in some cases it's very rational. In other cases, it's highly irrational. But I guess you can expect that with anything that's so new and revolutionary.
It's interesting. I mean, like from the creation standpoint, like I actually think this can have a leap forward for a lot of creators. I don't even know if it's like at the speed at which they create, but maybe just the ideas that they can make. So I'm hoping like amazing artists get hold of it and create like pretty amazing stuff. I think that's kind of where we can see the positive effects of it in the future.
I read something the other day that was talking about how, among other things, AI was discouraging especially younger males from creating. And I think that that's really sad in the fact that we need the energy, that kind of energy in the business. And if it's going someplace else, then, that's not a positive for the business at all. Just for music in general, because we need that new energy and we need the new trends to happen. And we're about due for something brand new. So hoping that happens sooner than later.
Yeah, that is pretty discouraging. I mean, I hope it's trends the other way soon. I mean, I even have experienced it myself. Like I'm a producer and on the side, nothing like serious, but I always am putting down ideas on Ableton and stuff like that. And I was thinking about this the other day. The rate at which I'm actually putting ideas down is lower than before, just because sometimes I have an idea and I'm like, like it's almost like in a way pointless. Whereas before you would, it's even if it's like a dumb, whatever, like, 4-bar loop, you would still put it down just because it's, whatever. But I think it has kind of slowed down the rate at which I actually do things, but that could just be an anecdotal thing. I might just be busy right now. So you never know, but yeah, it's interesting.
All right, Danny, last question. And thanks for your time. This is a great pleasure to meet you. What's the best piece of advice that maybe somebody imparted to you or you learned along the way? And I'm sure, having started a company as you have and gone through the growing pains and whatever, you've probably gotten some of this, I'm sure.
I was thinking about this too the other day. Like for me, it's like, and I forgot who told me, but just start executing is a very great words to live by. And for someone that creates on many fronts, it works for artists, it works for business people and marketers, etc. That's something that I've learned time and time again. And the successful things that, even if they're not that many, that we've been able to do have come from that. And it's just like, we've never been the approach of putting something out or holding back something that you have and saying it's behind a closed beta and putting an email list to get access to it. We put it out, even if 5 people use it. You take those 5 people, you learn from those 5 people, iterate, put something else out that's better. So that kind of iterative approach, I think, especially now, obviously in business, it's amazing, but even in the music creation world, I think is really important because you're looking at it from the perspective of someone that you're competing for so much attention, or you're competing against other people, right? Like that same fan that you want as an artist is getting hit by Nike because they're selling shoes, and they're getting hit by, whatever, Toyota to sell them a truck. So you need to compete against all these huge brands for attention, and even other influencers and creators. And so you need to take that digital marketing approach and understanding, I'm putting out, maybe 5 different video snippets of the same video with 5 different sections of the song, and seeing which one gets the most, even if you don't allocate ad spend, which one gets the most likes. And then from there, use that as the next step of, what you put out in the next video, and that iterative approach, I've seen it work really, really well for artists. And they've been able to not only save a bunch of money in marketing, but just speed up the rate at which they actually get to milestones, right? Whether it's like your first 1,000 followers or your first, whatever, 5,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. They've really figured that system out to the point where now that's all they do, right? They have an album and they'll do the waterfall strategy rather than just putting out the whole album and things like that to just, iterate. And so it kind of goes across all different facets. But I think just start executing is a really good mantra.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Very cool, Danny. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Bobby. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can also learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news, and find out about openings for my latest online classes at bobbyowsinski.com. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.